Hey, you guys, if you can hear me, I just got to go check on the internet connection real quick. I'll be right back. All right, let me see if I can get the internet to come up here on the iPad so that I can see you guys on the live chat. There we go. And believe it or not, before this, I used to work in IT, and the secret diagnostic or troubleshooting measure is turn it off and turn it back on. So that's all I did. Let's see. I hope everybody's doing well on a Friday afternoon. It's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles. You know, it's likely that we get to say that many, many days, but it's important to not take them for granted, to really appreciate the beauty of the days and the sunshine. A few of you on here. Sorry, just getting everything set up. How's that? You guys can hear me okay? Let me know if you're here. If you're watching, just say hi. So in the video, this is a case where if you normally watch this on your television for classes, you're going to want to switch over to a device, and so that you can utilize the live chat feature on the YouTube video, and that's how you can present any questions or topics or things that we can discuss in regards to the yoga life philosophy, and really a layer that I use and have learned, you know, through my practice over the years to not only express myself, but to be able to express the practice of yoga into our community at Urban, the community in general, the community through other studios that I've taught at, so on and so forth. So this is a venue and a platform for us to get a little bit more down the road in the conversation, and so that we don't only cling or hold on to the sense of yoga as something that is physical. I've heard from some of you that you're feeling things in your body this week. Your body is breaking down in certain regards. You have inflammation in your hips, which is actually a good thing. If you have this feeling of sensation that's not necessarily always there, but say you get up and you move a certain way, or you bend forward a little bit, and then that sensation all of a sudden hits you, that's the idea of your body being inflamed. And it's going to do that when you break it down, when you go through some of these stretches and you're opening yourself up. And inflammation is actually, you know, on a moderate basis. Obviously, we don't want to inflame ourselves into the point where we're debilitated from moving, but moderate inflammation is actually a good thing. It's your body's way of healing itself. So, you know, without being able to open up our leg and look into it, this could be a sign that your body is sharing with you that, you are in the process of repair. Something is breaking down, and the body is then going to draw itself to that area and then start to build itself back up. Okay? Terry, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. And hi, Anna. Anna. I think that's Anna. Is it Anna with one N? I believe so. Oh, it's cool. I love that you put a butterfly. We were just in the yard, and we got this little pool because it's so hot, just a little blow-up pool for our son. And there's been this orange, just like the one that you posted there, butterfly, that's been cruising around for the past couple days. And we've also had so much nature in the yard. Now, mind you, we live right in the middle of the city, just south of what's called Miracle Mile. So we're right kind of adjacent with West Hollywood and Beverly Hills and all of that. So we're right in the middle of the city, and we do have some landscape and things that we've done with trees and to make it feel, more like an oasis. But it's really awesome when you put these things in and you allow them to flourish and you take care of them and they grow, how nature comes around to visit. Several hummingbirds that are coming around daily. We have the butterflies, like I was talking about last night when I was getting ready for detox. I was watering some of the plants beforehand, and I haven't seen, a lizard. I can't even tell you how long it's been since I saw a lizard in the backyard. And granted, I'm spending much more time in the backyard. This is kind of the thing of, I want to buy a house with a red door. I've used this example before, and then all of a sudden you're driving and you see house after house with red doors, and you're like, so you're just turning on that light switch in your mind, and you're more aware of red doors. So maybe in this case, because I'm spending more time in the garden, but last night there was this lizard, and he just kind of crawled over my mat, and then went over into the bush. So it's definitely been a cool process and experience to be out in the yard and to share the space with nature a little bit more than we normally do. So for those of you that are on, take a moment, even if you just wanted to sit, close your eyes, and it can be anything that you're feeling, anything that you're thinking, questions that you have about poses. I feel like this works so much better if you guys put something out there, and then I can, give you a take. Last week, I think it was more so of me kind of reeling and reflecting and sharing some more things a little bit more vulnerably about my journey. But it's cool. You can find relativity, and it's nice to be vulnerable, and I love being vulnerable, as we would. So what we're doing, and kind of packing it into an hour here, once a week on Friday. If you go back to when we started doing 2 practices a day, I mentioned that this is the structure of what we would normally offer on a retreat. Practice in the morning, a practice in the evening, and then the space in between to lounge at the pool, have good meals, hang out, make new friends, take a nap, just really break the schedule of what your normal day-to-day is. Well, that has been broken for us in so many ways during this time, so it just came to me pretty much automatically to say, put in place the retreat schedule. But what also happens on a retreat, and I call the retreats Yoga Life, Urban Life retreats for a reason, is people end up connecting, obviously, and you're sitting around the pool and you're sharing stories about your past, and you're talking about yoga poses. So, is what would normally take place in breakfast or at a lunch or in the evenings when you're hanging out and having a glass of wine. We're taking this opportunity, packing it into an hour, and so that we can get some of this stuff. If you express it, even if it's just a matter of typing it into the video chat here, if you express it, it's going to move it, in theory, through you in a different way. It may continue to progress the practice. It's really helpful if you're a beginner to talk about beginner stuff. There is no, I guess, what's the word? graduation that we ever really come through in this practice. So beginners that are just starting out and having questions, it reminds people that have been practicing for a long time things that they can revisit in their body, or things that they haven't thought about in a while. And you just never know when something that you hear is going to be that moment when it actually connects. With so much information, swipe left if you will, and coming through us all the time, you never know when you're a little bit more present, you're in your body, when it's going to make sense, and you're going to have that connection and that moment of realization, which is yoga and something beyond the physical practice. I just want to say thank you to Ari. If you noticed the shirt that I'm wearing, it was went to the studio today to water the plants, and there was a package there. His Instagram is at Trusty Tribe. I believe it's on here, or Trusty Scribe, sorry, not Trusty Tribe, although that's cool too. Trusty Scribe, and he had dropped off this shirt for me at the studio. So I thank you so much. I can't wait to meet you in person. I know we've been sharing all of these practices together. It's been beautiful, and I thank you so much. There's nothing that strikes me more in my heart than when I get something, whether it's a t-shirt or a moment with somebody. It doesn't have to be a material object, but it's really amazing, and it feels so good to receive. So thank you. All right, so yes, Terry, you're going to definitely have to join us on a retreat. When that happens, we don't know. All that I could say is right before the pandemic started to really impact our society, we were working on a retreat in Guatemala. So we have a really beautiful place on a lake. Everything has been discussed, and we've talked to the people, and there's personal recommendations and folks that have been there before. So it's a really exciting place. When we get there, we don't know, but it's a pretty cool adventure. I know, Biz, you've been on the last retreat there in Cabo, and that was pretty special for sure. So let's get into some of the questions and things, and if anything comes to you, don't wait for me to stop talking, because I probably won't. Put it in the chat, and then I'll just start going down the chat messages, and we'll spend some time with each. Remember, you don't have to stay. I won't be offended if you stick around for your question and then sign off, or if you just want to have this on in the background, that's totally fine as well. Hi, Danielle. So Danielle asks, I'm trying to figure out how to bring the yoga life philosophy into my corporate job that is different than my passion. There's so many politics and different personalities that I feel. How would you recommend dealing with and developing being my true self in different areas of my life outside of yoga? So, great question. Personally, my past and my journey up to this point took me through corporate America. I was in corporate America for about 10 years of my life, if not a little bit longer. And it's a really interesting question or statement that you bring up, because as you begin to discover what you're passionate about in this yoga life philosophy, doesn't mean that you have to push anything away. Basically saying you don't have to make it harder on yourself than it already is. There's going to be thoughts and ideas and ways that you're going to be developing your life around your passion that could take some time. I'm not saying that they take a specified amount of time or it's going to take you a month, because it's eventually going to take you one breath. But this can form and formulate, into the experience of the living of the yoga life over a course of time and repetition. So we don't have to push things away that maybe come in and contradict that. The part that I remember experiencing was being on my yoga mat, discovering so much about myself, discovering so much about my relationships with everything, including my job, my friends, my family, you name it. It's a relationship to anything that we're interacting with in our lives. And I remember this self that was opening up on the mat, and it really felt incredible and to be in that self. And this was for, an hour class or a 75-minute class. Tag on the, welcome when you get to the studio, tag on the goodbye when you leave the studio. So about an hour and a half to 2 hours a day, you're getting to feel this blossoming version of yourself. And then cut to going back to work, or, just going home at the end of the day and whatnot. And it would feel like you're almost living a parallel life. Like you have two lives wrapped into this one life. There's this version that you're experiencing when you're on your mat, and you're really supported in that space of non-judgment and being who you really are and developing the thirst for your passion. But we may not necessarily know how that's all going to play out and to sustain and support ourselves. So having these moments when you are kind of toggling back into corporate America, the best thing that I can offer is to just really practice non-judgment, and to not, what I've learned, to not push others away that may be different than you, because then that's defeating the whole point of the practice, right? There is a selfish component into yoga when you're putting yourself on your mat and you're discovering these things, but that selfishness really wraps itself into that hour, that timeline when you're in your poses and your focus is on your breath. And from that place, what we'd love to see happen is that it turns into a selflessness and selfless acts when we do go back into the environment of the world. And so, I would say keeping your eyes open, not in a way that's passive. You want this to be, an organic process. So keeping your eyes open. And as I mentioned this week in classes, I was talking about listening and living from your heart. And so when you start listening and living from your heart, the idea is that the choices that you make are going to be a little bit different. So next time you think you're going to take a step up on that corporate ladder and you're only doing it because the money is better and you're really not that interested in it, and perhaps then, in that moment, you're going to feel the trust and the truth around not just taking that mindless step and then adding on into the next layer of distraction, and that might be actually pulling you away from your passion. And so not pushing those away that may look different, talk different, be different, actually incorporating them into your practice. And remember, you're not trying to prove anything, because your practice is really what resonates inside of you. You're being. And so you're actually being more compassionate in those situations. And then little by little, as that passion and continues to blossom and to grow, now there's going to be a point where, when are you going to ultimately build up enough trust, right, in whatever that passion may be, and to take the leap as that being, part of your life path. For me, finding yoga, becoming a yoga instructor, I was faced with this. It wasn't a decision, and I can talk more about that. It's a long-winded answer, but I was faced with this: become a yoga instructor. But in order to become a yoga instructor and start practicing that full time, I would have to take a 95% pay cut. So who in their right mind, based on what is stressing most of our world out right now, is the fact that they can't work and they can't make money, who in their right mind is going to voluntarily and take a 95% pay cut from what they were doing and the life that they were supporting in order to do something that they're passionate about? So I think that's an extreme account and situation, but it goes to show, right, that it may be in something much bigger that is living inside of you that simply feels right and helps you build up that trust and to eventually take that leap. My leap was, pretty intense, and it was a pretty big contradiction and to what I was doing and what I was supporting. It doesn't have to be that extreme, but there will probably be that moment where you'll simply feel the trust that is built up, the clarity that is formed around through all of your meditation, and so that the things that would have stressed you out about taking that 95% pay cut, they don't stress you out. You feel fully supported and fully nurtured, as you continue on your path and living your yoga life. So I hope that helps, Danielle. I love that you continue to express, what you're expressing, and I feel like it's really just unfolding the pages right now. And then little by little, you'll start to read what is on those pages of your true self, and it's all gonna play itself out exactly how it's supposed to. And you're right where you're supposed to be. It sounds cliche, but with this practice, we can build in that perspective that we are right where we're supposed to be, even when things might be frustrating or giving us that contradiction, so that we can learn a little bit more about it. But nobody can tell you that you're ready, and nobody else can tell you that you're not ready. This is something that you could discover through your practice. So thank you for sharing that. Biz, let's see. She says, this does feel like a retreat. It's so cool. I can't imagine what version of myself I would be without the practice to tap into. So bringing up, as I do so many times, version of myself. I get that most of the things that I might say are coming from a place that doesn't make logical, practical sense. And it shouldn't. It should go into your mind where it kind of jumbles your brain up a little bit until you can ultimately unravel it. And so something like a version of myself, I didn't have any context around versions of myself. I didn't believe, I didn't even have a teacher, in a sense, I guess, that presented it verbatim, like this idea that there are versions that we evolve through. You think of yourself as the day that you were born until the day that eventually you pass, maybe as one version. However, when you have a practice where you're evolving, where your mind is changing, right, in an hour, in a moment, in a pose, or your body is changing, sometimes these physical changes are just a huge symbolic representation of, the spiritual evolution or the emotional releases that are happening. So when you have some of these, shifts that are taking place, we use this idea that there's versions of ourselves. And the reason why I use the version concept is because a version gives you something in that you can kind of wrap it up like a present. And you could see, when the beginning of that version started, and then you can see where that version came to a close. Like these are, little containers. And so that you have the version so that you don't forget. And the version becomes one of your teachers. So I think I mentioned this maybe in the first Yoga Life chat. These versions become our teachers. Our greatest teacher sits inside of ourselves. And so while there's other teachers and people that are sharing the practice with you, we're all learning from each other. But really the inner or the internal investigation is what it's all about. So those versions become your teachers. You can put a little name on them if you want to. And as you continue to move forward, right, not in leaving something behind, but just in your growth, in your development, in your evolution, which has nothing to do with how old you are, then these versions will be there to support you. So if you start kind of pulling back into different actions or repeated actions that were a part of a previous version, then that version is going to say, hey, this is what you're doing right now. And you're going to remember, oh, yes, I've evolved from that version. This is my mindfulness bell reminder that I'm no longer that version. And then it rebuilds that confidence. And because when you go back out into this beautiful yet crazy world, just like our minds can be, there's going to be test after test after test, and so many distractions and so many things pulling at you and pushing at you. So it's quite the endeavor, which is why, these 2 classes a day, and hands down, through this, after this, 1 class a day is really, I think, where all of our lives should at least include that. And I understand there's pulls and there's pushes, but 1 hour a day, and for you, and to recall this center and the version that you are right now, and so that we don't continue to slip and to slide into these previous versions, but we get to stand up nice and tall when we wake up in the morning, and then take that with, into the actions of whatever we're getting into and throughout the day. So thank you for bringing up the versions, Biz. Hey, cousin. Hope you're doing well. Question about breathing during practice. It's hard for me to exhale out of my nose. What is the difference between inhale and exhale through the nose and inhale and exhale through the nose and out of the mouth? So ideally, and this is obviously based on the full function of, the anatomical components of your body and the functional anatomy, that there's not something blocking your nasal passage. So what if, for example, somebody has a deviated septum and the top part of your nose is actually pushing in and you can't really get the air to travel through there? So first, I think you want to investigate, is there something within your anatomical function of the breath? Is there something that is unique about your body in where that passage is constricted to a certain degree? Because if that's the case and you don't have as much surface area or as much area to draw the breath into, what's that going to do? It's going to create an added stressor that your mind has to deal with, because your body doesn't feel like it's getting the oxygen that it needs to support you. So it's going to build that stress, and then it's probably going to induce more anxiety than what the poses are already introducing. So that's the first thing that I would explore and investigate with your body, is see if it's there. When somebody is not feeling well or they have a cold and their nose is stuffed, I actually recommend, breathing as calmly as you can through your mouth. So it's not a one-stop shop to breathe in through your nose, out through your nose. This is a breath technique that, if the airway is open, that you can work and to balance the breath in this way, keeping your lips sealed, and so that you can contain the prana, the energy that you're pulling in to utilize in the practice and in the space of your body to make the poses, kind of spread out and expand. That's how you're containing the prana, is by keeping your lips sealed and breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. When we add the constriction of the muscles in the throat, now you're talking about a type of pranayama, which is the practice of controlling the breath. So it's a practice of controlling the breath as to why we seal the lips and breathe in through the nose and out through the nose, right? And what we've noticed is that as you're breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, it creates a calmer response in relation to your central nervous system. So it's going to adhere more towards the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic. And so if you think about, or if you don't have kind of a basis of understanding, parasympathetic is that you feel calm. So as we're introducing postures and movement, these are things that don't necessarily feel calm. They're physically exerting. Your muscles are having to work. Your blood is pumping, all of those things. So to counter that which is taking us up energetically, muscularly, remember, you have all of these systems working together in your body. When you introduce the breath, and that is calming, all about that breath control and to maintain the calm endeavor as you're feeling this flood of prana and energy that is moving through you. And the contrast of that, I don't think anybody, if you go out for a run today, right, if you go for a jog and you start jogging, you're going to be breathing, and you're probably going to breathe in and out of your mouth. You're just going to be and so that air is coming out of your mouth. That's actually stimulating the sympathetic response, where connected to the cardiovascular system. So you have the respiratory system connected to the cardiovascular system. That is going to increase your heart rate. So mouth breathing in yoga tends to elevate the heart rate, where what we're focused and trying to do is keep the heart rate as low as we possibly can, even as we increase the intensity of the postures. Like this morning, cousin, we were talking about the woof element of the side crow. It is not easy to keep your lips sealed, breathing through your nose and coming into side crow. And you feel that, right? When your focus is keep my lips sealed, breathe through my nose, the intensity of the posture, the tightness of the body, the lack of space to breathe into that posture, right? Everything starts to experience the limitation, and the heart rate's going to go up. So we're doing it less, right? The heart rate will go up less, ideally, if we keep the lips sealed and we're breathing through the nose. If we start breathing out of our mouth, and not only is our heart rate going up, but now we're losing the containment, which is creating the muscular contraction, and to then feel the lightness in the pose. So that's the idea. I would explore it again from the functional anatomy if there's anything unique that is going on with your nasal passage if it's closed. But 9 out of 10 people are going to have difficulty training the brain and to breathe in that way. So if there's no obstructions to the passage, then continue to practice. And if you're meeting that point where the air just doesn't feel like it can go in and out of your nose, you might be pushing a little bit too hard physically. So we all want to do the poses and we all want to do the flows. This is more about expanding ourselves and to endure, right, this element of practice, and so that we can make it to that peaceful transition of meditation at the end in Shavasana. So back off the poses. We learn so much in the relationship of the breath by holding ourselves accountable into that nostril breathing the entire time, and then let that build up. Feel all that prana, and then when you lie down at the end and you let that practice of breath control go, right, your nervous system is going to be flooded with a magnificent sense of calm and peace and relaxation. So, good question, and let me know how it's feeling, but very common if you don't have any obstructions through the nasal passage for this to be challenging, especially as you're moving through these flows. These flows are not necessarily easy, but I encourage everybody to listen to their body and do them to the point that they can. Hey, back to biz. Is there a time where you would be willing to share that story of how you made and that change, meaning pay cut, into yoga life story? I relate and I'm curious. Yeah, let me see if there's any other questions, and then we'll toggle back to that if we've got some more time and space to share. Oh, I love that you're in love with this version of yourself. Don't get too attached to it, though. Appreciate it for what it is, because as much as you can be excited, you don't want to kind of nestle yourself into the comfort zone. There's a version where you are open to the idea of change, and whereas one day maybe you weren't as open to the idea of change and changes that may be taking place in your life. So if this version is starting to blossom that openness and that courage and that trust, then that's a beautiful place to be. And, you know, I'm not trying to stress you out and say, hey, you know, it's going to end one day, but it's going to end one day, and you're going to, you know, continue to transform. This practice and process hasn't stopped since I started it. It's been moving through me the entire time. So, you know, it's beautiful. Derek, what's up? Derek, give me something. Give me a topic. Give me a question. You've been, for those of you that don't know Derek, and I think Derek's got some of his friends now practicing with us, Terry, Sherry. Derek has been a student and a friend of mine since pretty much day one that I showed up in Los Angeles, and we didn't know each other before that. So if anybody has seen the full context on display of practicing with me and through me, and there is a vulnerability when I'm teaching, because I'm sharing things from my heart, not verbatim and not from the I element, but definitely relativity, and you guys can feel probably things that I'm going through in my life without me even telling you about them when you're in my yoga classes. And because it's the only way that it can work for me, it's got to flow from the most authentic place, and most of the time it is timely as this moment that we're sitting in right now. It's unplanned and it's unforced, and there's just so much that we can draw from, and I'm just talking about one person. So, you know, Derek has definitely been a very dear friend and student, and we've been through so much life, yoga life, yoga life, and we've, you know, you really, when you start to get into life and relationships, you realize you cover the full gamut, especially when you stop sugarcoating yourself around relationships and you get into this space where you can, you know, really feel that there's no judgment around who you are. And I hope that's a lot of what you guys can feel when we're practicing together and we're around each other in the studio, is that there's no judgment. And so we can go on those rides, and we can go up and we can go down, and we can agree and we can disagree, but all of it comes from this place of practice, which is a place of mutual respect and love and compassion and sharing. And so developing our ability, still using you, Derek, if you're still listening, but developing our ability to communicate. And when we learn and we trust somebody that we can communicate with, we're learning about communicating with ourselves. And so all of these things become so relevant into whatever we take back with us into in society and back to Danielle into our jobs and our careers and whatnot. So yeah, thank you, Derek, and I hope you have some kind of question or something that you can add on here to the live chat, because we've been doing this for almost a decade now in Los Angeles, and I feel like it's still just the beginning as we get into something like this quarantine and the pandemic that is taking place in the world. It makes me think about what have we been talking about up to this point? I know that we've been developing, and I know that we've been processing and doing so much in feeling evolution and growth and all of that. But now we get into something like this, and my mind's like, what are we doing? So just the beginning. Cool, cousin. This makes sense. No one has ever explained that so well. Thank you. And yes, the detox is just a special place because it doesn't, if you haven't done the detox, which I think most of you on here have, but if you watch this at any point, anybody listening right now, if you have not done the detox class, it is based on a different type of breath control, which is not controlling the breath at all. It's still pranayama. It is still a practice that is called natural breathing. So I invite you to come to that practice because it can be just as challenging and to sustain natural breathing as it is and to sustain a nostril breathing in a practice. But detox just gives us so much space with less distraction of movement and adherence into the relationship with our body and what we tend to identify with our body and the fit level of our body and all of those kinds of things. This is full acceptance of our body, and as Biz describes it as plop yoga. Get into a pose, plop yourself down onto that mat wherever you are, and let gravity work through you and work into the soft tissue, connective tissue and fascia of your body. So please, this could be for you if you're 16 years old, 14 years old, 50 years old, 30 years old, 70 years old, any age. Detox is such a good place to join us and to get used to some practice. You're still getting all the other layers, just not necessarily the extreme intensity of the physical part, but in a different way. You'll definitely have an opportunity to feel your body. Terry, thanks for the breathing talk. I still mess up on it. Of course. I mean, if you guys hear me on the mat, I'm, obviously talking and doing the poses with you when I'm in a practice and somebody else is guiding it, or if I'm not sharing it with you guys on this platform, I'm fully committed to my breath. But, we all have those moments, and that's really a cool relationship to dive into and to really not make it about anything else and to just let it be about how can I, filter my focus into my breath? And then when he says this or we end up doing that, how can I continue to filter myself back into the breath? And I'm sure you're getting better. I think we all get better and have moments of bettering our breath practice when, it is top of mind, and it's not about how pretty the pose is. You're going to realize how pretty the pose is one day when you're sitting at the pool with your friend and you're like, hey, take a picture of me doing this half moon right now, and you take a breath into it and you take a picture and you look at it, and you're going to see how it was the breath filling out the expression of your body versus your mind, or just forcing it from a physical perspective. Bella just asked if you can say happy birthday to Mia. It's tomorrow. Mia, it's your birthday tomorrow? So we had Bella the other week. It was her birthday. Check out this spider coming down right now. So Mia, you have to look up the relevance, the symbolic meaning of the spider, because as we were saying happy birthday to you, there is this incredible spider that just came down in the garden, and it's got one little string. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'll point and maybe you could see with my finger pointing. But look up, Mia, happy birthday, look up the symbolic meaning of the spider. And that might give you a little something as you plant the seeds for this trip that you're about to take around the sun. So I don't know if everybody thinks of this necessarily when it's your birthday, but you're actually starting a new trip and that you're going to take around the sun. So 1 year is one trip that you're going to travel all the way around the sun. So when you take a moment, and it doesn't matter if, I don't know exactly how old you are, Mia, but if you're, 5 years old, 10 years old, 8 years old, 30 years old, if you take a moment and you just sit with what seeds, not what you want to do and what you want to accomplish in the next year, but what seeds and do you want to plant and for this trip around the sun, because the sun is going to help those seeds grow, along with a lot of support from your family and from your friends and people that will hold you accountable, from things that will challenge you and things that you might face. But having your practice in planting those seeds, then you'll have more awareness around whatever those seeds were as they start to grow. So you're picking up these tools as you take this trip around the sun that are going to end up serving you not only in those moments of the year, but for your life to come. And if you start earlier, the earlier the better. A lot of us maybe didn't find this practice. I meet a few people here and there that either grew up with parents that were, had a practice, or mom was a yoga teacher, things like that. But for the majority of us, we didn't necessarily grow up in that environment. And so, I found my practice when I was in my mid to late 20s. Hadn't done anything as far as a structured mindfulness and meditation practice up to that point. So if you're listening and you're, planting these seeds, and I know there's even children's books now on mindfulness, which probably existed when I was a kid, but because I wasn't in that environment, because that wasn't, something that maybe we were aware of in our family, then I wasn't exposed to it. So if you're exposed to it now, then this just feels like, richness that is growing for you and something that you can water for a long time to come. So happy birthday again, Mia. Oh, my Aunt Kim is proud. Thank you. My mom's sister, the sweetest, most, I think about you, Aunt Kim, a lot, and I'm sure we all, think about our family members and our aunts and our uncles and our cousins, and we come from the south side of Chicago. We have a large network of cousins, which are basically siblings to me, and I think all of us would probably say the same thing. We feel more like siblings even as we've gotten into our, quote, adulthood. I don't, know that we're adults, but I think we would all consider ourselves more siblings than we are cousins, and so aunts and uncles became more like, secondary moms and dads in a beautiful way. So always so much support from my aunt, and so much admiration that I have, and as I continue to reflect on my cousins and on my aunt and on the life that they have, and everything that she did to support them, and 4 kids under one roof, and single parenting for many, many, many years. It's just so inspiring, especially now that I have a little one. And I hope that, we end up living so much in the life that we're required, or I guess everybody doesn't feel that they're required to support, but those of us that support it, you live in that life where it's like, this is what I have to do to support my family. And along the way, it can be very difficult, as I'm learning with one child, to be like, oh, I'm going to set myself, some space to take care of myself. So at this point, I know my aunt now is not only still supporting her children, but now supporting her grandchildren as a grandmother, as a nonna, I believe. That's what it is in Italian, a nonna. And hope that you are finding the space, and I know you've been taking the classes with us, and it doesn't matter again how old we are, if the space is being offered to you now, and for you to really feel this love coming back to you from everything that you've given, and I'm sure all the sacrifices that you've had. And I hope you guys that are listening, whoever listens to this, we all have these people in our lives. And so if we can be, to any degree, somebody that holds that space or invites those people, into a practice, and where they get to feel this element of nurturing as they've been nurturing others for so long, I just think it's so special and such an honor to be able to share that. So thank you. Terry says, Derek, looking forward to meeting you someday. So glad you hooked me up on this live stream. It's been a huge part of my life these days. Thank you. Sherry and I will come to LA and meet you and Joe. So Derek introducing the practice, and I didn't know the full extent of the relationship, so if Terry and Derek haven't met, that is going to be an incredible encounter, I feel like, with no expectation, of course, but the fact that we're getting to have all of these experiences together, it's like Anil said this morning in the practice, he was overwhelmed with joy, right, to the point of tears, and he doesn't know anybody on these live streams. He's never met me. He's only been referred to it by a friend, and he's overwhelmed with joy, and he says, I can't wait to meet you, but I feel like I've already met you. So how impactful might this be when we can actually get together? We do retreat reunions when we have 15, 20 people on a retreat. We've been practicing with hundreds and hundreds of people, so I can only dream and fantasize about the energy when I have no idea, Terry, that you and Sherry are going to be coming into town, or even if I have an idea and then you walk into the studio, or somebody that has been practicing with us from Argentina, London, wherever, is visiting in Los Angeles, and they walk into the studio and we get to have that encounter. I feel like the energy already is so palpable, that was unexpected through a virtual platform, that when it does become tangible and palpable and we can look at that person, don't forget, you guys, our eyes, right? This story is not over, of our ability to see each other and to be around each other. I was just at the studio, and if you even cross paths with somebody these days that you haven't seen in a long time, there is a different interpretation. So this story isn't over. We are going to be able to see each other, feel each other, and I think, with this foundation and continuation of the practice, it's going to be a really powerful community to be a part of. Now that doesn't only sit locally, the local element of the studio on La Brea, there's no energy in there right now. She's in a holding pattern. She's been meditating for 55 days at this point, just waiting for all of us to come back and to give her energy. So we've taken the local element, now we've expanded it globally, and then we'll localize, and then we'll start to mix everything together. And so it'll be a nice mesh and a nice blend of local and global, and then coming in and feeling local, and then going out. If we travel and do a retreat, we'll probably get people from all over the world joining and participating. So just can't wait for it, you guys. Terry, again, your detox classes are amazing. I'm glad you can't hear me talking back about how long we hold them. Yes, the talk back is real in a detox practice. And this is very similar, and I've tried to explain this in some of the classes, which I'm not sure I do a great job at, but it's very similar on this virtual platform, the way that we're doing it on YouTube versus doing it on a Zoom where you could talk to me and I can see you. It would be nice to be able to see you, and I know that we can mute the voices coming back and whatnot, but on the YouTube, where you could chat obviously and say hi, but when there's no dialogue coming back to me, it's pretty much how it is when you're in a class. You have the random occasion when somebody says something back to you in a class, and it's so jarring and so alarming, and you're like, I totally wasn't expecting that to be blurted out in the class. There's like this unwritten etiquette, I guess. I never told people to not speak in a yoga class, and I actually find it quite endearing and comfortable. Now, this doesn't, those of you that come to the practice, it doesn't mean just start blurting things out, but you know, it's quite pleasant and really a true moment, if you will, when somebody does say something in a class. But in general, it's just like this platform. You get onto your mat and there is that dialogue going on. And some of the greatest practices that I've ever had with teachers that I've taken with are the ones where my talk and my chatter was so strong, right? This was the frustration or sometimes even the anger was so strongly being projected onto that instructor for what, you know, I felt they were making me do, that when I came out of the practice, you like walk out of the lobby and remember we're in the hot room, it's 100 degrees, you're soaking wet, and you look over at them and you give them the look like, don't even talk to me right now. Those have been some of the best experiences because there is so much churning up inside of you. So if you really trust the experience, the process, the teacher, you'll allow them and to take you there where you might have that day and that moment when you come off of the mat and you're leaving the class and you're like, don't talk to me. We'll talk in a little bit. I need some time to cool down. And that's a cool thing, because remember, when we're teaching and when I'm holding you in those poses, obviously I'm doing these and I practice, you know, in a similar fashion, but so many things that are being said and so many, you know, poses that we're holding for long periods of time, we're just poking and prodding. We're plucking and really, you know, drawing things up so that they can surface all out of the good-hearted nature and service, and so that you don't carry that shit with you anymore. So you know that it's coming from a good place, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. So let that chatter come. Again, we're building this mutual respect in the relationship. And, you know, sometimes the person that gives it to me the most is my wife, because she knows me the most. She knows what happened in my day. And so she knows that when I'm sharing certain things, right, it might be a little bit more personal to her than to everybody else in the room. And so sometimes she'll be the one that feels like, oh, this was really kind of on target with something that may have been going on in our lives. And that will draw something up. That will draw a response. And so we have a lot of conversations where we do need some space and to just let whatever those things were. These weren't things necessarily directed towards each other, but we just need some space and to let that conversation, right, come down, because the practice is going to lift it up. So let it break down, give some space. Again, after the practice, it's so important that we give ourselves that space and that we give that space to other people. So when we're in a studio, or if you're practicing with somebody at home right now, take 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes after you're done practicing and just leave each other alone. Don't even talk about if you thought it was great, because you may have thought it was great and they may have thought that it was the most challenging, horrible practice they've ever had. Take 10, 15, set this before you even start. Just know that that's going to be part of your experience, right? Maybe you interact in other ways. Maybe it's just we're going to not verbalize things about the class, to give each other that expansion of space and to really continue the process to unravel itself. It could be a great gift if, you know, you're willing to do that, whether it's coming off your mat at the studio. You know, you get done with a class at the studio, you're back in the change room. It's always working, but if you come out of the hot room and the first thing that you're talking about in the change room with somebody is how hot that class was, there's so much more about that experience than the heat. And us sharing or thinking, you know, it's about the heat is just probably interjecting, okay, kind of some space that might be sitting in somebody. So you just want to kind of leave that door open so that you're not coming in and stealing the space. This is another practice in yoga, but you're not going in and stealing the space from somebody else. You're being mindful with your movements. And so just a little vow. You could say hi, you could say bye, have a good day, so nice to see you, are you coming tomorrow, those kinds of things. But to really get into and personalized, this is what I felt kind of thing. It could actually be taking that space from somebody else's practice, because they could be in a totally different place, obviously, than you are, right? So we don't really need or require that validation when we come out of a practice. The practice is the practice. I hope that makes sense. 7, oh, I missed that one, Mia. Happy 7th birthday tomorrow. Definitely not adult's cousin. Okay, Terry says also, and try and do the mindful meditation, but really struggle with meditation and get very distraction. I know I need it, but it's hard. I love that this is what you're expressing right now. I did that piece this morning on the CBS News talking about meditation and mindfulness, and it is hard, into whatever, I guess, your definition of hard is. You know, hard could be, it's hard to climb a mountain or Mount Everest. Hard could be, you know, it's hard to run a marathon. So it's all an interpretation of your mind as to what hard actually means. And so it could be cool to kind of explore that, explore your definition of hard. Distractions are real, and it's something that we all face on a regular basis in our lives. The key of distractions is that a distraction is something that is pulling you away from something that you're attempting to attract towards. If you change kind of the mold of meditation, that there's really nothing, you're not drawing towards anything. You're not pinning yourself down. You're not figuring something out. You're actually opening yourself up. So the idea is that our doors are closed. Our walls and our windows are shuttered. And meditation, as you begin to open those windows and those doors, and you start to bring the walls down, now the distraction, what you thought was the distraction, is actually the practice. I sit here in these 5-minute meditations, and there's an auto shop that is 2 blocks down on a busy street here by the house, and there's sanding, and there's a bell, and then there's helicopters that fly overhead, and then there's all these things that on the surface level, they're distractions. But when I get into meditation, and my meditation is the opening of the door. See, the doors are only shut inside of me. The universe doesn't have any doors. The solar system doesn't have any doors. It's wide open. So that's what we're hoping to connect to. So in order to have a connection, we've got to open up all the doors to everything. Distraction literally goes away. And distraction was just a meaning and definition of something and that you form in your mind, right? Part of the delusions and the illusions of what we've created with our minds, this powerful processing mind, and that we were so fortunate and to be gifted with. So just think about, right, the universe and the solar system. There's no doors. And that's what you want to open yourself to. So this whole idea of distraction need not exist. The bells, the horns, the cars, the kids, you guys saw if you watched the news piece, Ben comes, into the practice. Even if Ben was coming in and out of the practice, I'm not going to ignore him. I'm going to let him be a part of it. I'm going to continue on my direction of my moving meditation, breathing. He can wrap himself. It's the whole idea of what I'm talking about with the mosquitoes or, the spider that just came down during this. We're all part of this thing together. So opening the doors, opening the windows, and taking down the walls, now you start to feel this excitement and vibration. And that, to me, is the meditative state and the quality where the mind, because why is the mind getting looped out? It's getting looped out because it thinks it has to draw to something, and it can't do that. So if it thinks it has to go to this point, and if it doesn't get there, then it didn't succeed. That's why it's getting stressed out. That's why we think meditation isn't working for me. So flip the switch. It's not about that. See how that goes and put it in practice. Maybe this venue and conversation helps us hear that a little bit more, and we're inclined and excited to see how that goes in this evening's meditation. And all we can do is take it one practice at a time. You might be so curious that even after this Yoga Life live chat, you take 5 minutes and you go find a space and you sit down and you close your eyes and you start to use that anchor of observing the air as it comes into your body and the air as it goes out of your body, and then just see what happens. Right? And then we'll report back, and heck, this conversation, you might evolve to a whole nother version just from this conversation today, which is so exciting. Cousin Mary wants to know a pose or poses that are best for keeping your balance. So a little bit more clarity on balance. There's the functional and the anatomical components of balance. And so if we're talking about learning to feel physically balanced, a lot of the things that throw us off balance in poses is what's going on in our mind. So standing on one leg in tree pose, working a pose like Warrior 3, Half Moon, anytime you're on one leg and you're challenging that physicality into balance, the reason why we fall out isn't necessarily because our body isn't strong enough to support us. Your body is going to do exactly what it needs to do in relationship to gravity. So the muscles are going to fire without you even thinking about it. It's a subconscious feature of your muscular system. If you put your leg back, this muscle is going to turn on, this muscle is going to turn off. All that's going to happen based on the relationship of the gravity subconsciously. But what's going on in your mind is ultimately what's going to have you wobble, tilt, and topple over. So how do we get into the mind, right? Just as I was talking about with the meditation, is through the anchoring of the breath. And so whether you're doing yoga poses or you're just feeling, a little spun out and a lack of balance in life, I always say the 3 breaths. 18 seconds will change your life. 3 seconds inhale, 3 seconds exhale. Repeat that 3 times. That's 18 seconds, and you can go from an experience that you were having in life where you feel out of balance to feeling this centered, expanded, and a moment of balance where you can then take your next step forward. Metaphorically, of course, you could be still, but taking that next breath, right, draws you more into that relationship of balance and homeostasis, which is really, right, where we exist most naturally. It's all the other foreign shit and the manufactured world that we live in that we think we need to ultimately subscribe to, and that has us building a life that is out of balance. So I know I've covered balance, and there's a lot more that I can talk about with balance, but I just wanted to give you a few things that you might be able to entertain or reflect on, and then we can take it a little bit further in our practices and throughout our next live chats if you guys bring it back up. But this is all a process and a practice, and it's basically when you were watching those sitcoms back in the day, I don't know if they still do this, but remember when they would get to the end and it would come up with the to be continued? Well, this yoga life is always stamped with to be continued. You don't have to obsess over it. You don't have to pick up the book and study it for 8 hours, as far as I know. There's books, trust me, there's books and there's information and ways that we can, take all of this and gather more of this philosophy within ourselves, but you don't have to do that. All you have to do, right, is be engaged in that stamp at the end of a practice, or at the end of a conversation, or at the end of a coffee talk with a friend where it gets a little bit deeper, or a friend at the yoga studio, and just stamp it with to be continued. Right? So I want to thank all of you for being on here, and know that as this is designed to be a smaller, more intimate group, the beauty of this is that it lives on the channel. The video is here for anybody to watch. So please share it if you found relevance. Send it to a yoga friend, pass it around. And I can't wait to practice with you all this evening and again tomorrow. I thank you for being here. And of course, have a beautiful rest of your day. And until next time, yoga life and to be continued, everybody. Namaste.